Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of A Case of Distrust. Sam Shipman had told me that Green's letter was a fake. He said he'd phone me at the Southern Coffee when he got a chance to look into Green's past. I still had to chase up Green's bootlegging. Now I knew the letter was a fake and Shipman was looking into Green's past for me. I just needed to chase up... Okay, we just said that. I stepped into the street and thought about where to go. Let's go to the Tin Spoon Lounge. The Tin Spoon Lounge was a speakeasy in North Beach run by Tiny Paul, the gangster that Green had put in with. I'd never been there. The mob keeps a tight lip on their own houses, but I figured it would be a good place to chase Green's bootlegging story. I hailed a driver, gave him the address, and stepped through the back door. I debated talking with the driver. I started talking with the driver, who began speaking about his recent European vacation. Went to Normandy on a steamliner. I asked about the trip. Oh, the Olympic was grand. Excellent machine. Crossed the Atlantic in 5 days. Plenty of amenities in their new tourist cabins, too. It's about Normandy. He pinched his nose between his thumb and forefinger and shook his head from side to side. I can see why these immigrants keep flooding in. That entire old world stinks. You know they eat frogs and snails? No, the steamliner is where I want to be. Next time I'll just stay on the boat. He still had the frown on his face as we pulled into my destination. I opened the cab door in front of a North Beach warehouse with a wooden sign. The sign's text was too worn for me to decipher any of its English, but a small gray spoon was still visible below the letters. I rapped my knuckles twice over the large metal door. The panel just above my head slid sideways to reveal a pair of eyes. The eyes looked me up and down, then just stared ahead. They were black and held no emotion. The room beyond was dimly lit, so I couldn't see much of their surrounding face. I cleared my throat, then a rumbling voice emerged from behind the door. Fill full your cups, feel no distress, at all our great thoughts shrinking less. I looked at the eyes, still unmoving. I understood. The doorman wanted a password. I thought I might have something in my notes that could help. Pretty sure I don't. Let's see. Use as password. I repeated his line back to him. Yep, that's what I said to you, but that ain't what I'm looking for. The doorman wanted a password to conclude his riddle. Fill full your cups, feel no distress, at all our great thoughts shrinking less. Try one last time, but I'm pretty sure I don't have it. No, probably not. We'll try it, but I don't know what that is, but it ain't the password, came the response. The small window shut with a thud. Prohibition was a joke in San Francisco, and most speakeasies would let just about anyone in the door, but the mob ones weren't as relaxed with their rules. I knew I wouldn't enter until I said the correct response. I wondered who I could ask about a speakeasy password. I know who we can ask. Let's go to Green's house. Green's house might contain more clues about his past, or some reason a threatening letter would come his way, and if I got lucky, Mrs. Green would be there to pump with more questions. I waved down a taxi cab and was on my way. I thought I might talk with the driver to pass the time. When the driver turned to ask where I wanted to go, I saw his striking blue eyes, looked years younger than the graying temples beneath his wool cap. I was curious about his history. I struck up a conversation which led to his past life. Ever hear of the Suicide Club, he asked. I admitted I hadn't. Bob the Goat coined that phrase. Poor guy ate a runway for his last meal. War pilots, I asked? Half right. We were mail carriers. Uncle Sam was training us for the military. Shame so few made it. I asked why he left. Rumor said the average pilot lasted 900 hours, likely not far off. Flying with no lights, no emergency landing, barely a weather report, never a parachute. What do they expect? Glad you're driving a taxi cab now? I asked as we pulled up to my destination. My wife is, but I miss flying every day. He turned to tip his cap and I saw a sparkle in his eyes. I thanked him for the ride and left the car. The Greens' apartment was a section of old Western Addition mansion. The owners had divided it for struggling families to rent after the 1906 fire. Once downtown had been rebuilt, people of means moved out of the area. Recent immigrants, mainly from Japan, rented most of the apartments in this part of town. I knocked on the front door but didn't get a response. The latch was undone, so I pushed it open and stepped into the room. The room reeked of laudanum. Based on the smell, I imagined she had enough opium to knock out a horse. Uh-oh. Okay, what do we got here? I found Mrs. Green slumped in her chair, eyes closed, head rocking slowly. "Hello, Mrs. Green," I said loudly. She let out a long moan from the chair, then lifted her head but failed to raise her eyelids. She tilted her head to the side, giggled, then let it loll back into place. I shook her lightly and she moaned again but said nothing more. The ashtray on top of the smallest table was overflowing with spent cigarettes. Empty bottles were strewn around the apartment. I brought one to my nose and smelled the distinct aroma of laudanum, opium mixed with booze, a harsh tonic. A wilting plant was on the furthest table from the door. I could never keep plants alive either. Even as the petals fell, they were still a vibrant yellow. Let's see. I opened the drawer of the backmost table. In it were 2 train tickets. I mumbled St. Louis to myself, but then came the cackling voice of Mrs. Green. "Ha, forget about moving, Connor. I won't budge." Her head remained raised, but her eyelids still remained closed. I asked her further questions, but her head just lolled back to where it had been. There was nothing else she'd say. The bottles on top of the round table were mostly empty. The gray trench coat was hanging in the doorway. It certainly looked identical to Lewis's. I searched the pockets and found no identifying marks. It might have been a different jacket, but its recent appearance was off-putting. Okay, that might actually be it. Try talking to her one more time, I guess. Nope, she's not going to say anything. Okay. The frame was just warped enough to prevent the front door from completely closing. For a speakeasy runner, or for a rum runner, he's not doing very well, it doesn't seem. Let's go back to the Southern Coffee. Shipman said he'd call Southern Coffee if I found any dirt on Green. If he found any dirt on Green, I could go see if I had any messages. Of course, if I was stuck on the case, a stiff drink with Frankie could give me a hint as well. I grabbed a taxi cab and told the driver where I wanted to go. I thought about talking with him on the way. As I glanced towards the driver, I spotted a strange device attached to his windshield. A rectangular mirror, about 3 inches tall and 7 inches wide, was held by a metal bracket. I asked about the mirror. He looked at me through it, without needing to turn around. "See how I can see you?" he asked. "I can also see that bulb behind us." I turned in my seat and saw a police wagon a block behind us. "It's called a cop spotter," he continued as I turned back to the mirror. "Sold by this Philip Berger. He works pretty well for knowing when to bend the law." "Might be a good tool for bootleggers," I offered, as we arrived at my destination. He turned around for the first time with a wide grin. "Yeah, it might be." I smiled back and left the taxicab. So, a rearview mirror, huh? Southern Coffee was an automat diner. Yep. Okay. Let's, yeah, I didn't actually look around that much last time. Frankie kept a collection of pre-prohibition bottles on the shelf behind the counter. Their shapes and colors were far more alluring than the opaque jugs of modern swill. This label had a poem on it. Fill full your cups, feel no distress, at all our great thoughts shrinking less, we'll do a good deed nevertheless. Ah, okay, well that's the thing I was looking for. This label showed a rearing horse in the front of a forest. I had no idea how the horse related to California's most genuine bourbon whiskey, though I suppose I did stare at the picture long enough to whet my appetite for the bottle's contents. Okay, well I already figured out what I want. Let's see, Frankie was still behind the bar. I wondered if Shipman had left any messages for me. Of course, if I was stuck on the case, a long drink with him might be helpful. I looked at Frankie. What's eating you, kid? He asked. I sat on my regular stool and rapped my knuckles on the bar. Any messages, Frankie? And what do you mean by that? Well, I told Sam Shipman, an old contact on the force, to leave any dirt with you if you found it. Frankie laughed. So now I'm your bartender and your secretary. Say, if I become your housemaid, will you at least pay me? So I'm guessing you haven't heard anything. Nothing yet, Miss Chief. Frankie chuckled. Shipman's supposed to call you about Green? What have you got so far? No real breaks to speak of, I said. Well, alright, I'll let you know if this Shipman gives him a call. I thanked him. What else you got? You know what, let's see. Never mind, I said and swiveled my seat away from the bar. Now that I actually have a lead, let's go back to the Spoon Lounge. And let's skip the taxi discussion. Knock again. Fill full your cups, feel no distress, at all our great thoughts shrinking less. I actually have it now. Let's see. Was it the... Yep, bottle with a poem. Well, do a good deed nevertheless, I recited what I remembered for one of Frankie's bottles. The eyes squinted. Wait here, came a gruff response. The panel slid shut and I heard footsteps walking away. I rolled a cigarette and waited. After a quarter of an hour, the panel opened again. Bar's closed, but you could shoot pool in the upstairs room, said the eyes. He pulled the door ajar so that I could see a set of metal stairs. I walked up the stairs and opened the thin wooden door to the billiards room. It was much smaller than I expected for a gangster's paradise. The only light came from the hanging lamps above the billiard table. The haze of cigarette smoke darkened the room's corners. Rack on the wall held 5 cues. The room was lit only by dangling lamps above the billiards table. Let's see. Clean ashtray set next to an emptied glass on the table in the corner. Bottle of unlabeled wine sat on the table. When I sniffed, it smelled of strong spice. A couple tall chairs were placed around the billiards table. The pool table was the focus of the space. The light reflecting from its smooth green surface tinted the den. I saw a tall, broad-shouldered man playing the table by himself. Based on Frankie's description, I gathered this was Tiny Paul. I cleared my throat to get him to look at me, then followed with a casual, "Are you ever going to take a shot?" He stood up straight, rested his cue on the table, and looked at me sideways. It was the petulant look of a boy forced to play with a younger sibling. "Hello," he sighed. I asked him more about billiards. "Thing is," he said in a baritone, "once you clear more balls than the other guy, you've got more crap in your way. Billiards is all about navigating through the crap." I'd never shot much pool, but I thought he might like me more if I feigned interest. I considered lying to him, telling him that I played a lot. I'll stick to cards. I didn't lie to him just then. Stud, blackjack, or bridge? He asked hoarsely. I raised an eyebrow, and he showed sheepish grin. Gambler plays 'em all. He continued after cracking his knuckles. But I don't think you're here for a game. See, I asked for a drink. Mind pouring us each a growler? I hoped getting Paul's lips wet might make it easier to grab something out of him, but he wasn't having it. Paul sighed. We're closed here, you'll have to come back later. He seemed annoyed at my stalling. You like green, I asked. The wrinkles on his brow deepened. Like or dislike it don't matter sometimes. I work with what I'm given, and he's given us good lead. I suppose that's why you're here, Malone. So he'd known me too. The doorman must have looked me up. The bay talks fast. Anyhow, he said, eyeing the billiards table, you need something else from me? If you want something better, ask specific. Mobsters never failed to grate my nerves. He wouldn't tell me anything unless I pushed him with what I already know. Let's see. We could ask him about the letter, but we already know it's fake. Know anything about this note? I asked, and pulled out the letter with the black hand on it. Tiny Paul looked at the page and then laughed with his whole body. So there is a letter. Green's shaken over that. I'm not losing any sleep, though. Green and I are the best of pals, but nobody will touch him with our protection, and none of us sent it to him, or else I'd know about it. Anything else? Let's see. Let's ask him about, a wine bottle. That bottle on the table, I asked. He said that's the stuff, a sample from Green's source. I knew some Napa wine that smells exactly like it, I said to him. That's so? Well, that one's from Vancouver. I had to work every muscle in my face to stop my jaw from hitting the floor. Where's the wine from, Paul? I asked him again. It's from Vancouver, he repeated. Frankie only told me that Napa grapes had this type of spice. If Paul didn't know this bottle was local, I wasn't going to tell him. But it told me something very important. I had to confirm with Frankie. But if my hunch was on the money, then Connor Green was not getting his wine from Canada, and he wasn't playing square with Tiny Paul. Anything else, Paul asked me? I snapped back in the moment, considered if I needed him to tell me anything else, though I'd just snagged quite the load. Let's see. Let's ask him... Let's ask him about the password. We'll do a good deed nevertheless. Why make an old liquor slogan your password? Paul smiled. The old liquor slogan, that's rich. And here I thought you dicks were supposed to be learned. I raised a questioning brow. It's called The Drinking Song, a poem by Thomas Hardy, an old Brit. I asked more about the poem. It's all about a man thinking we're at the top of the chain and slowly understanding we aren't. All our thoughts, all our theories amount to nothing. We're just apes floating in a wide ocean of space. How can you possibly cope with that? How do we even know what we are now? But to hell with it. Take your mind off it, have a drink, do something good. Not a bad code, if you ask me. I tilted my head, neither agreeing or disagreeing, but simply impressed by Paul's knowledge of the Victorian poetry. Alright, that's enough of a lesson. Is there something else you wanted, or can I get back to this? He motioned to the billiards table. Let's see, statements? Let's see. Oh, this is interesting. I didn't even look at the statement. Oh, his wife's a singer. Green's wife is a torture here, I asked. With the pipe she's got built in that body, she's the reason most fellas keep coming back to the joint. How about, Empty bottles. What's that got to do with any of this? I tried to press him further, but he's got nothing from it. He sighed, apparently eager to get back to his game. Anything else? Let's see. Bottle with a horse. Could ask about the new bootlegging scheme, but he might not know about it. Let's ask about Redstone's stable. Know anything about Redstone's stable, I asked. Heard the name. But why all the gossip? He could tell you more about himself. You won't give me anything on him? Now why would I do that? Anything else? Okay, we're done. I didn't have anything else to say to him, so he cracked his knuckles, arched over the table, and resumed lining up shots. Let's get out of here. Let's go back to... I kind of want to go to Green's house, but... let's go back to the coffee house. I glanced towards the driver and noticed the right side of his face was covered by a tin plate, painted to match his light skin tone. Set in the plate was a glass eye. I asked him about it. He gave a rough grunt and said, "The war." I stayed silent for a moment and he said, "Lys, near Flanders." "Which division?" 69th Infantry, he replied. Again, after a pause, he continued, "The Hun came at us quick, don't remember much." He tapped his faceplate and said, "Early casualty." "Was that your only battle?" I asked. He gave a short grunt and nodded. "Wish it wasn't. Many friends stayed at the front." We rolled to the destination. He turned to me and smiled. "Thanks for talking. Most won't look at me." I smiled back and stepped out of the taxicab. Okay, let's just talk to Frankie. Let's see, the shipment. Nothing yet, Miss Chief. "Well, you'll like this," I told him. "Remember that wine you offered me?" "Oh, my Zinfandel you nearly finished?" "Where did you say that grape was from?" "It's from here, California, Napa or Sonoma." "You sure?" "Yes, Malone, that's the only place these grapes grow nowadays." "And not Canada?" I asked. "What are you swinging at, Malone?" Tiny Paul had a bottle of wine that tasted exact same, that identical spice. He said it was from Green's bootlegging source from Vancouver. "Malone, I'm telling you," he said, "no wine anywhere in the world has that spice. It ain't from Vancouver, and Green ain't getting it cheap." "Well, you just confirmed my hunch. Green's got no source." "He must be swindling Tiny Paul and the entire ferry gang, and I bet he'll run away with the money." Frankie let out a long whistle of disbelief. Just then the phone rang. Frankie picked it up with a "hello, right?" then handed me the receiver, saying, "Shipment." "PC," he said in an excited voice, crackling the speaker. "Find anything on Green?" I asked. "Nothing," he said. I was puzzled. "Then why'd you call?" "That's the idea. I first got pinched for a brawl in Ferry Building. That was in November 1920. Before that, no Connor Green anywhere in the bay." "Strange," he continued. "Has trouble staying out of a mess. Mixed up in something nearly every week. So only appearing a few years ago? That Oakland backstory is Swiss cheese." "What are you thinking? Green's got a different past?" I asked. "Uh-huh," he said. "Guess that he just got here in 1920 and never been straight about where he's from." "Wait," I said. "If Connor Green was a criminal in another town, easily some cop would recognize the name and send him back home. SFPD isn't that thick." "Right," Shipman agreed. "If it's the same name, could be his real identity disappeared in another town." I thought aloud. So he might have changed lives. Is there any way to confirm that? If Green fled, the local bulls would keep looking for him, but not if they thought he died. Get these cases sometimes where mobsters fake a death to escape a burg. Use a mangled stiff to do it. Someone unrecognizable. That way they get out of town without a chase. Got any mobster deaths in 1920, I asked. A ton. Too many to look through, but narrow the search down for me. A town he might be from. I could check a specific city's archive. Anything in your notes that tell us where he's from? Oh, we do know. Well, we know he's got a ticket to St. Louis. I found some tickets to St. Louis in Green's apartment, I told him. Mrs. was ruffled up when I picked him up. I stayed on the telephone while Shipman used another line to call his contact at the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. I was nursing a glass of gin when he got back to me. Lucky break, PC. Seems that there is one that fits the bill. He read aloud an article from St. Louis Post-Dispatch, dated October 8th, 1920. Gun battle at June's Diner. Gangster dead. Suspected bandit clubhouse scene of another shooting. A heated argument turned deadly Thursday as multiple shots rang inside June's Diner at 14th Street. Suspected hideout of Egan's Rats. A man was found dead at the scene, unidentified due to shotgun wounds to his face. Police suspect he is mobster Breg the Jester, who hired a private eye to investigate threats on his life. That sounds familiar. Last month, Chief of Police Brandon said investigating gangster-on-gangster deaths was a waste of time, and the discovery of the threats leads many to believe the police won't look further into the case. Hold on. This Breg character had hired a private detective? Seems police are quick to forget a case, if they got reason to think it's just gangster violence. That lines up with Green, I said. Gets better. Bragg's first name? Connor. I cursed loudly through the telephone. I continue with my theory. And your story says this Breg was deeply indebted, so maybe Green's just waiting in San Francisco until he's got enough dough to skip town and go home. He have some bootlegging business, Shipman asked? Why would he leave that behind? No, I shook my head. His wine is complete bunk. It's local stuff. Not any Canadian route he might be claiming. I didn't know why he'd pull a fast one until now. Returning Breg to St. Louis could be huge. Swing by the station, we'll iron it all out. I agreed and slammed the receiver on its pegs. Seemed I need to make my way back to the station. So what's the news on Green? Frankie asked as I headed up the stairs. Now it seemed like I had all the details. I summarized it for him. So the total wrap. Green isn't really Green at all. He's Breg the Jester, a former member of Egan's Rats from St. Louis. He's Breg? Frankie was shocked. But he's been here a while, Malone. Sure, I said, but only since 1920. He couldn't pay off his debts in Missouri, so he faked his death and moved to San Francisco. He's been longing to go back, but he needs a way to settle his score before he can show his face again. Is that where his bootlegging comes in? Frankie asked. Uh-huh. Green set up a sham rum-running scheme. He bought local wine, but claimed to get it at lower prices from Canada. He convinced Tiny Paul to front him a heap of cash for it. Instead of providing the wine, he's planning to skip town with Paul's money, disappearing to St. Louis with enough dough to pay back his debts. He already faked his death once, so he'll do it again here? That's right. His plan is similar to his last one. Hire a detective claiming he's scared for his life, fake his death, and then the police won't bother with underground violence. Frankie looked at me with a blank stare. Seems like all the pieces fit, he said. So he just hired you as cover? I sighed. Seems like it. Don't worry about that, Frankie started saying, but I cut him off. I'm going to see Shipman now. I'll sweep away this mess and then come back to see you. Have a stiff drink ready. Just be careful, Malone. Egan's Rats have a reputation. They can be ruthless. I turned and walked up the stairs. There was only one place to go. Green had hired me to cover so that he could blow town. Shipman held the final evidence to sink that plan. I needed to get to the station. Something tells me it's not going to be that easy, but we'll see. I stepped into the taxi cabs and was consumed with my own thoughts about the case. I'd finally caught a break, but it was a dud. I hadn't realized it, but I'd been reveling in real detective work. Once I learned it was all bunk, my mind reverted to its incessant nagging. I knew that a woman could be a good investigator, but I questioned why I thought that was me. I was hardly helping anyone. It all came back to the same basic premise. You're failing, my inner voice said. I began to feel nauseous in the car. My mind repeated its last thought. You are failing. And then everything turned to black, as if someone had shut out all the lights. My naked arms faded into view. They emitted a soft white glow. I waved them in front of me, leaving streaks in my vision. Between the streaks, it appeared in the distance. I could hardly see, but as the object billowed, a clarity came to me. Then I understood what it was. Lewis's gray coat. I floated towards it. I reached to grab the coat, which was when I saw the needles. No, not needles, glass, shards falling all around me. One piece wedged itself deep in my right elbow. I grimaced, but I was unable to make any noise or movements. But then as suddenly as the rain had started, it stopped. I looked upwards with caution, wary of the rain's return, but above me I saw the gray coat. It was no longer billowing. It was rigid, a shield against the terrible rain. It started falling, slowly at first, but quickly it gained speed. It came upon me and enveloped me completely. It was suffocating. I couldn't breathe. I let out a gasp, and then the light. It pierced my eye sockets, hitting the back of my skull like a hammer on an anvil. I directed all my energy into my lungs and forced out a yell. That helped. Everything became quiet. I could breathe deeply. I noticed someone beside me. He gradually came into focus. Shipman showed his teeth in a big smile. I looked at him from my laying position on the Murphy bed. He swung his leg over a chair and sat beside me. Thought you'd never come around, he said. What happened? I tried to ask him something, but another bolt of pain raced up my elbow. All I managed was a groan. Relax, PC, just a few scratches. Quite the auto crash. Flew straight through the front window. They took a large piece of glass out of your right arm. I remember none of that. I mumbled the words auto crash to myself and wondered how bad the accident must have been. Shipman removed a flask from his pocket and screwed the top and handed it to me. Not the best hooch, but might get rid of that binging in your head. I took a swig. I closed my eyes and sighed a deep breath, and its warmth burned down my throat. I know modern medicine doubts it, but that gulp of moonshine helped. I went to give the flask back to Shipman, but he put out his hand to stop me. Hang on to it. You might need another swig after what I'm about to tell you. I propped myself up on my left shoulder to listen. About Green's case, the two of us figured he was going to fake his own death. Shipman clicked his tongue to his teeth and looked towards the floor. That ain't happening. Last night, Connor Green was shot through the heart twice. What? I shouted. The exclamation was impulsive. I swung my legs quickly around and sat on the edge of the bed. My headache had suddenly vanished. Whoa there, Shipman said. Look, been here with you all night, he added quickly, in that chair beside the bed. Just telephoned the station to check in, and that's the rap they gave me. Told them what I'd known from you, and they said they'd chase it up. How do you know it was him? Another involuntary question. I was running on instinct. PC, faking your death involves a mangled body, shot through the chest. His face is still intact. Whatever Green was planning on doing, he didn't get that far. And we looked it up. He doesn't have a twin. That'd be too easy, Shipman grinned. Green hired you for this case. Gives you every right to follow it up if you want. That said, he was likely taking you for a ride. Wouldn't blame you if you want to drop it. But I'd like your help, PC. You know the case. Could use your head even if it's been a little bumped. Once you're feeling better, I'll be at the station. Come find me there. Shipman stood up and cracked his back. Maybe I'll catch some shut-eye on top of my desk, too. Sure beats the chair you got. He turned and walked out. I stood up from my creaking bed and surveyed the cluttered apartment. All right. Still got our cat. Although we actually have a bed now. I don't think this was here last time. Got a typewriter, got all kinds of stuff. Okay, let's do a quick look and see if there's anything new. Let's see, that's the way out. Book. Oh, notebook. Okay. Newspaper. My apartment was already cramped when the Murphy bed was up. With it down, I could barely squeeze through the living room. A cat slept at the foot of the bed. I scratched behind his ear, and he seemed to like that. Yep. Yep, that's it. Anyway, this probably is going to be a good place to stop for now. Yeah, so just when it looked like everything was coming together, everything kind of falls apart. And it looks like the real investigation's about to start. But we'll have to follow that up next time. Thanks for watching. I'll see you soon. Take care.